Welcome to Business Over Borders. I'm your host, Leo Tucker, and I'm joined today by Mike McGirr, our VP of Compliance. Welcome, Mike. We're here to talk about something a little exciting, something a little terrifying, PCI compliance. Now, I learned today that PCI compliance, what it means is the payment card industry compliance. I'd always heard of it as PCI.
Yep.
What is that in broad terms?
Basically, to really secure cardholder data and to protect credit cards from being breached and used on the dark web or being sold on the dark web and being used fraudulently.
Okay, so, I mean, I remember back a number of years ago, there were these breaches all the time where so-and-so would have, you know, all the credit cards were bought and sold on the internet and everything, and it was always breach this, breach that. So when that happened, I'm assuming there was some sort of PCI compliance, non-compliance rather. Is that kind of what was going on?
Yeah, it was really the breaches. You think of the early 2000s when a lot of these breaches were taking place. And back then it was, you know, we still had the cards with tracked data where you had to swipe the card versus having the chip and pin these days. So people would be able to obtain that tracked data and just bring brand new cards. We evolved as an industry, so you know we have chips and pin, but it wasn't until 2004 when they introduced PCI at the beginning.
Oh, wow, that's pretty recent.
20 years.
I suppose so. I remember the old, you know, you'd take your credit card into the place and they put it in and go like actually swipe it.
Knuckle buster.
A big stack of carbon copies there. I remember doing that at the airport when I used to work there.
Yep, definitely.
So that was back before the PCI days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's, you know, really PCI is trying to, you know, look at how can cards be breached, right? How can we self-regulate ourselves to reduce that scope? So overall in PCI, there's, you know, basically 12 different requirements. All those requirements have multiple different items you need to do to secure the information. You have level 1 merchants or merchants that process over 6 million transactions in a year versus like level 2, 3, or 4 merchants where, you know, a brand new merchant, they're doing less than 20,000 transactions a year. They're still a level 4 merchant and they still have to be PCI compliant. You know, they have to make sure they have, you know, the firewalls in place. They have to make sure they have the proper authentication, the cards encrypted throughout the whole life cycle of the transaction.
Right.
There's all these different factors that they need to do. But the main difference between a level 1 merchant and a level 4 merchant is like a level 1, you have to have an on-site audit. You have to have somebody do a ROC, a report of compliance, and they look and make sure that everything that you say you're doing, you're actually doing. They test it and validate it and give you your AOC or your attestation of compliance.
And that's different from like a level 4?
Yeah, in level 4, you go through the process and you're doing a self-assessment. So, you know, sometimes they have almost like a turbo text for PCI, right? For some of these merchants, these vendors will have, answer these questions. Are you securing the information? Do you have firewalls?
Right.
Do you have the training in place? You have, you know, all the different factors to meet PCI compliance. So
you're writing credit card numbers down on sticky notes.
Yeah, you don't have all the card information throughout the office. You have clean whiteboards everywhere, everything else, yeah.
Okay, so that's all based on kind of volume of transactions, I'm assuming, or just yearly revenue or something?
Yep, and just the amount of transactions you're processing, just strictly on the card count.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yep.
So, I mean, how onerous is it, I suppose, for, let's say I'm a new business, I'm selling tap shoes. That's my thing. I sell tap shoes for this example, and I want to open up my storefront and sell tap shoes. You know, I'm only selling, you know, hundreds a year, so I'm probably not up in the $6 million mark. So I'd probably be around the level 4.
Yeah.
I mean, what does a business my side need to understand about PCI compliance?
It's really, you want to partner with companies that can offload that compliance, right? The need to be PCI compliant. If you're using an acquire where in a checkout, if you're online, that you make sure that your vendors are PCI compliant, right? So you can segregate the data and the information. So your checkout page, everything, your acquirer that you're using, all the vendors that touch cardholder data are PCI compliant, which will help reduce the scope, what you need to do as a business owner, as a small business guy selling tap shoes.
Right. So if I've got my, the people who touch that information down the line. I need to make sure that anyone I'm dealing with is equally or more PCI compliant than my business.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at all the large acquirers in the space, right, they have to be PCI compliant. They're touching card order data. They're transmitting the data from the issuing banks, from Visa, MasterCard, back to the merchants. So they're involved with the entire life cycle, right? So all those partners that be PCI compliant, but then it's, who's touching the checkout page? A lot of the breaches that take place these days, people will put malware on the checkout page. And so as somebody types in their credit card information, it's just retrieved right there. It's pulled, it's saved, and then minutes later, they can use the information.
Oh, wow.
So if you're not checking your checkout page or scanning, so you have to do part of the requirements. You have to do, used to be quarterly scans. Starting March of 2025, you have to start doing weekly scans.
Weekly?
On your checkout page. So that's the biggest threat, right? So, it used to be the track data. They wanted to make it reproduce the cards. Now they're just saying, hey, we can just go on this website. We can put the malware on there. Basically, script pulls off the information. There's nothing for them to do. So now you're doing the weekly scans and making sure there hasn't been new script added to that checkout page.
Oh,
so that's a big burden that's across the industry, and people are trying to figure out, if I'm doing it quarterly now and I have to react to these scans, if I'm doing it weekly, what's that mean for the business? So it's something that's definitely needed. It makes sense, but logistics, how we move forward and do that, so it'd be interesting how that plays out.
Yeah, without crippling the businesses while you're trying to protect them at the same time.
Exactly.
So, I mean, we were talking about breaches earlier. Tell us a little bit about your history and kind of what you've seen. You've got quite the background in compliance. So
I don't have too many gray hairs, right?
Yeah.
No, so I started back in '99, so I've been 25 years in the space. So when I first started, like we were saying earlier, there wasn't really a PCI enforcement, right? It was just people assume that they're doing what they're supposed to do to protect the cardholder information. Then all these large breaches took place. Large retailers were getting fined, millions of dollars.
Now, where are these fines being levied from? Who's issuing these fines?
Yeah, so typically it's the card networks, so Visa, MasterCard.
Okay.
They will fine the acquirer that's processing for the merchant, and so the acquirer has the relationship with the merchant. So they will fine the acquirer, and the acquirer passes the fine down to the merchant directly. And the fines depend on what's compromised, right? If it's just cardholder information, like the card number,
right,
and there's no expiration date, there's no CVC, then the fine might be less. But if back in the day when it was track data, the full track 1, track 2, all the information was compromised, those fines were literally millions of dollars.
Any stick out in your mind that were particularly large?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was 2017, British Airways, they were fined $229 million.
What?
I'm not 100% positive if it was just how much was related to the credit cards, but there were some clients, I don't think they were public, but that I was specifically working with that were definitely fined over, close to $2-3 million. But think about once the breach takes place, then there's all the work that you need to do on the back end. So you have to have a forensic investigation. So you have to hire a company to go on site and say, okay, when did this intrusion take place? How did it take place?
Is it still taking place?
Is that threat gone? Has it been removed? Are they still on the system somehow? Right? So you not only have the fines from the breach itself, then you're paying tens of thousands of dollars to have the forensic investigation, which is obviously an impact on the business day-to-day operation, right? Anytime you're taking away from just the sales and growing the business and dealing with stuff like this, it's going to be a huge impact on the IT staff, the CTO, and the developers and everybody else.
Man,
so
absolutely,
it's quite extensive, the forensic investigation, and then they publish usually it's a 20-30 page report of like, here's how the intrusion took place, here are our findings, this is when it was fixed and addressed, and here's the fallout, and based on this time frame, here's the amount of cards that were impacted, right? So we know it took place February 1st through in 2021 through April 1st, 2023.
Yeah.
That's how many cards were processed. So here's the cards that are at risk, and that's how the fines are being leveraged, saying, here, we feel that these cards are at risk, here's the data that was compromised, therefore, congratulations. here's your prize.
Oh boy. Now, I mean, the figures you dropped, the multi-millions, hundreds of millions of dollars fines, obviously those are for larger corporations, but I mean, this is something that small and medium businesses need to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely, right? Even a small shop, right? Say you're only doing like $200,000 a year in sales, selling your tap shoes. Maybe you're doing really good. Maybe you're doing close to $1 million.
Business is booming,
right?
baby.
Maybe it's $1 million, but even those fines can be $50,000 to a merchant even of that size, right? So I think now they sort of cap the fines at like $500,000 per incident, and if you have like 2 incidents, those fines are to go up more,
right?
But they've capped them now at $500,000. But even a small merchant, $50,000 if you're doing $1 million in sales, obviously that's a big dent. Plus the forensic investigation and all the other stuff that you need to get done.
Yeah, no, that's a serious deal. So, as the proud proprietor of a tap shoe industry here, it's not something I would have thought of right out of the gate.
Right.
I go down to, local bank and get a little terminal to take payments and, call up, one of the acquirers to set up the online store, and I'm off to the races.
Yep.
How do I learn as a small, medium business owner or looking to scale or looking to move into, online space or something?
Yep.
How do those merchants, those stores get more information on the PCI compliance?
Yeah.
Like, how do they get right? You mentioned partnering with, companies that provide that service, but what else is there to kind of get educated about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's PCI Council that's been created shortly after 2004 in the early 2000s. That's evolved, and they have sort of best practices, definitely tons of information on their website that you can, absorb and get the handle of. But then, like, looking to see who the top QSAs, quality service assessors, that would go out and do that on-site audit if you were to do it, if you needed that, if you sort of graduated up from a level 4 merchant up to a level 3 or 2 merchant, or level 1 with the on-site. But yeah, definitely the PCI Council, its website, and if you just Googled the top QSAs, you have information on there, and then really you really, as you're looking at your provider, for you to pick Stripe, Adyen, check out all these large players that are out there, Chase Payment Tech, wherever you use, they'll help educate you too. They should have. If they don't have a compliance program in place with PCI, then you probably shouldn't use them.
Right. Not the big time guys are already doing that, so be wary.
Yep.
So, working at a payments company, I hear a lot of rumblings about some changes coming to the PCI world. I don't know any of the specifics. Can you sort of fill me in on what's happening or what has happened lately? What's new with PCI right now?
So it's always evolving, right? It's always changing. They're looking at how these breaches take place and what can we do to be more proactive, right? So they were at PCI 3.2. Now going forward, next year it's PCI 4.0. Some of the biggest change in my mind is like the encryption of the cardholder data needs to be encrypted the whole entire life cycle.
Okay.
I think I mentioned before too, the weekly scans, going from quarterly scans to weekly scans.
So that's coming to life.
That's March of this March 2025. That's the requirement. I think it's requirement 6.4.3. The only reason I remember is a double play, 643, double play, right? If you have a system that you're using, company portal, whatever,
like a CRM or something,
CRM that's not touching cardholder data,
okay,
that system is not part of the PCI scope, right? So that's why another thing companies can do is, as they're building their infrastructure from an IT point of view, is make sure they reduce that scope for PCI, right? So it doesn't need to be involved with that transaction lifecycle. It doesn't need to go from their checkout page into their data set, and they can leave that out, right? Do whatever you can to minimize the vulnerabilities that your company might have.
So it's only touching, ideally, a small subset.
Exactly.
It's just the payment information lives there. We don't have, contracts or, customer information unrelated there. Okay.
And you never store information. You never have cardholder, like PAN data on your systems whatsoever. You don't store the CVC. You never want to store that. So there's definitely best practices that you want to do to reduce that overall scope and vulnerabilities and financial sort of reputation risk that you might have as a company.
No, that's good information. That's all coming March of next year.
Yeah, March 2025, rolling out.
It's coming in hot.
And then they'll evolve after that, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for joining us on Business Over Borders. I'm Leo Tucker. And if you like this content, feel free to like and subscribe. And if you want to hear about more coming from us, hit that little bell down there. Thanks, everybody.
Brought to you by the Reach Network. Visit withreach.com/network for more.